This week on the Book Drop, Michelle Carlson chats with collection development librarian Melanie Schultz about OPL's 2020 Reading Challenge. The group offers up their picks for Own Voices titles, and we reminisce about our favorite rereads for our query of the week. This is the Book Drop.
So today I am here with Melanie Schultz, our collection development librarian, and we are going to be talking about the 2020 Reading Challenge. So hi, Melanie.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Yeah. What can you tell us about the 2020 Reading Challenge and some of the history of the Reading Challenge with the Omaha Public Library?
So this is the second year that we've done a reading challenge, and our reading challenge is really a way for our community to challenge themselves to read 12 books in 12 different categories. Some of these categories might be right up our patrons' alley, while others might be a bit outside of their comfort zones, which allows them to expand their horizons with the kinds of books that are out there so that they can explore and hopefully learn something new or find some new favorites.
Very cool. And so how can people participate?
Yeah, so we chose 12 categories. They can be tackled once a month throughout the year, but patrons can also feel free to complete the challenges on their own timeline. And we have lists and blogs on our website with ideas for books to read in each challenge. We have all of the information on our website at omahalibrary.org. There's a little link that says 2020 Reading Challenge, and people will go there, they'll click, they'll read all of the details about it. We have, if patrons were lucky enough to get a notebook in our branches when we were open, they can continue to track there. There's a little sheet in the back that they will tear out and return to us when we are open again. But if they weren't able to get that notebook, there are two other options. We have a log sheet on our website that they can print out at home and start keeping track that way, and then they can turn that in when we reopen. Or for people who are already done with the challenges and want to get their title submitted right now, they can do so through an online form on the website, and then they just would not need to turn in a paper sheet at all.
Very cool. And what do they get when they have completed this?
Yeah, so they will get, this last year we did a prize pack of literary themed merchandise. It had some tote bags, mugs, bookish pins, and things like that. So they'll be entered into a prize drawing for that kind of thing for this year as well.
Awesome. And if I'm struggling with one of the challenges, I just don't know what to read for, let's say, the Own Voices challenge, how can I find resources or suggestions?
On our website, on that same link off of the main page, we do have some blogs and lists that have a whole bunch of titles that our librarians had put together. But then they can also suggest or request a custom reading list that's on our website, and librarians can get back to them with some suggestions that are tailored just for them.
That is so cool. I love that feature that we get to offer. So what challenge are you looking forward to tackling this year?
Well, so I was just looking at how far along I've come. I'm halfway through,
Nice.
and right now I'm working on number 7, which I hadn't even realized it, but I am working on number 7 because my son and I are reading Harry Potter together right now, so that will count for the reading a book made into a movie or TV show, or I might count it for the fantasy book. I'm not sure yet, but it is fun, especially when you are kind of reading a book that you didn't even think would fit into a theme, and then you look back through our challenges and you're like, oh, actually it works for this, or hey, I read it in one sitting, so I can count it.
That is awesome. So you're reading it with your son. So is he also participating in the challenge?
You know, he wasn't, but maybe I should get him involved now.
Yeah. But do you recommend that children could?
They definitely could, yeah. The titles that are in the blogs and lists, they are geared for adults, but teens and kids can compete as well.
Very cool. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Melanie, for chatting with me today about the 2020 Reading Challenge. Again, listeners, you can check out the library website for more information about that. And thank you. Well,
yes, thanks. I've got one more thing. If I can
yes, please.
Mention, we would love to hear what our patrons are reading. So if you are going through the reading challenge, and if you're on social media, please tell us about it, tag at Omaha Library so that we can stay connected to you even while our branches are closed.
I love that. Yes, absolutely. I do love hearing what other people are reading. So very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, thanks. Bye.
Hello, friends. Let's do intros. Tell our listeners who you are, what you do for the library, and what branch they can normally find you at.
Hi there. I'm Michelle Carlson, the book club librarian, and you can find me at the Willa Cather branch.
Hello, my name is David Dick. I am a specialist that you can normally find at the Abrahams branch.
It's Ellie Roberts. I am also a specialist, primarily work with children, and I also am found at the Abrahams branch.
This is Anna Wilcoxon. I am the Diversity and Inclusion Librarian for OPL, and I am typically at the South Omaha Library.
And I'm Erin Dewar. I'm the Readers and Writers Librarian. I'm usually at the main library downtown. So today we're talking about Own Voices, which is one of the challenges for OPL's 2020 Reading Challenge. Michelle, you got to chat with Melanie, our collection development librarian, who I think we could credit with creating the OPL Reading Challenge.
Mm-hmm.
But what can you tell our listeners about Own Voices if they're not already familiar with that term?
So Own Voices is a really cool movement that started online a couple years ago. So created via Twitter by author Corinne Dalvis in 2015, the hashtag Own Voices indicates the work of fiction whose protagonist and author share a marginalized identity. So Own Voices describes a book, not a person. By definition, it's writing about a character who shares your identity, which makes the story Own Voices. In our world, books are metaphorically known as mirrors or windows or sliding doors. A book can reflect a version of yourself or be a window or sliding door to see outside of yourself and learn about those that have different experiences. Fiction is obviously one of our best ways to have someone represented and whose experiences share their story of their own life. One of my favorite quotes by author and illustrator Grace Lynn is, "Books erase bias. They make the uncommon every day and the mundane exotic. A book makes all cultures universal."
That's awesome. So we've all come prepared to offer up some suggestions for Own Voices titles for the reading challenge or just for your everyday reading. So Michelle, I'll kick it back to you and let you kick us off. So what's your first pick?
So a book that I was exposed to more than a couple years ago was George by Alex Gino. It is a sensitive, honest, and much needed story about a trans girl. This title has also been on the American Library Association's Office for Intellectual Freedom Banned and Challenged Books list. It was #1 in 2019, even though the book came out, I think, 2014. The book is geared towards middle grade as it follows George as she longs to play Charlotte in her school play, but is told she cannot even audition for the part because she is a boy. But she knows that she's a girl and she wants more than anything for the rest of the world to see it. The story is sad and eye-opening, partly because of the bullying George endures, but even more so because of her loving mom's inability to understand. It's a heartwarming and yet still amusing tale about learning to accept who you are, and it also educates the reader without being too pushy. Gino cleverly chooses to tell George's story in third-person narration, which introduces George in female pronouns, a fact that completely changes the way we read the book. George is not a boy wanting to be a girl, but a girl in a world where no one else can see it, which is an important distinction. So if you're looking for something inspiring and moving, I recommend George, which is available in our catalog in print, ebook, and downloadable audiobook. David, what do you have for us?
All my picks are going to be science fiction, horror, or fantasy. These are genres, if you've listened to our previous episodes, that you know I love normally, but I also think they have amazing potential for Own Voices stories because they can ask us to imagine a different world and ask us to identify with and empathize with people outside of our own experiences. You know, like if you can imagine yourself as an alien, you can imagine yourself as someone of a different race or a different gender or a different sexual preference and understand, you know, like their humanity through that. I just finished the concluding book of the Benti trilogy, which I started a couple years ago. But yeah, it's a thought-provoking and compelling trilogy of novellas about a young woman leaving home for the first time and facing change. It's a science fiction series that focuses on making peace, as the title character has a unique ability called being a harmonizer. And yeah, it's told very much from the perspective of like African cultures.
David, that's one of the Tor novellas, isn't it?
It is.
Cool. Yeah, that's a imprint that publishes a lot of science fiction and fantasy novellas that are like maybe 200 pages max.
Yeah, the concluding volume is the only one that breaks 200 pages, and just barely. So it's
Cool.
All three are a pretty fast read. You can even pick up an ebook of all three of them at once. It is available through OPL in print or an ebook, and the first one, just called Benti, is also available as a downloadable audiobook. Ellie, how about you?
So I'm going to talk about Freshwater by Akwaeke Emezi. At one point in the novel, Emezi writes, "A question wrapped in a breath. How do you survive when they place a god inside your body?" So their debut follows Ada, a girl born in Nigeria with a chorus of spirits in her head. These spirits take turns narrating chapters as individuals and as a whole, and I especially love the unconventional narrative structure that this creates in the book. So Ada is driven by these godlike voices, frequently towards self-destructive behavior that seeks to free her spirits. When she attends college in the US, a traumatic event clarifies three primary gods who shift in and out of Ada's consciousness. Azemi, who is Nigerian, trans, and non-binary, has noted that this dark, lush novel is semi-autobiographical. And I found the ruminations on indigenous Igbo knowledge and philosophy, gender dysphoria and violence, and survival and imagination illuminating and like truly goosebump inducing in this book. It's just so powerful and intense and intimate. So to wrap my description, I'll let Ada speak for herself. She says, "I am a village full of faces and a compound full of bones, translucent thousands." And if that seems a little too kind of like big and conceptual for you, as Emezi does also have a YA book that came out last year called Pet, and they also have a book that's coming out this fall that seems like it's going to be a little more kind of conventional and actiony, and I believe that one is called The Death of Vivek Oji. Anna, I'm excited to hear about your picks.
Yeah, Ellie, that book has been on my to-read list for such a long time. I need to pick it up. Just what you read gave me like little tingles. That was beautiful. Yeah.
The book is just stunning.
Yeah, cool. So the first pick I have is Salvage the Bones by Jesmyn Ward, who's one of my favorite authors. It was hard to choose one of her books. This one won the National Book Award for Fiction in 2011 and is available as an ebook through OPL. So Ward is a Black woman from Mississippi, and so is the narrator of this particular story. Her name is Esh. She's 14, pregnant, and living in rural Mississippi with her 3 brothers and an alcoholic father. Hurricane Katrina is on the horizon, and this book illustrates their efforts to prepare while they're living in already very strained circumstances. So the entirety of the novel takes place over 12 days, and it culminates in the hurricane's arrival. If you're an animal lover, there's a storyline in this book that involves dog fighting, which was really hard for me to read, but it felt like a very powerful and honest element of the story, like it was necessary in kind of a harsh way. The pace intensifies as the book goes on, and Ward's writing is really descriptive and atmospheric, and she really highlights the beauty that you can find in broken down places. I just love the way that she describes everything from like red dirt to a bruise. It's all like it all seems really poetic. So if you like dramatic and moving stories with a really captivating narrator, this would be a really great book for you to pick up. Erin, what do you have to pick for this topic?
Yeah, so like David, I tried to go almost one genre. So my first 2 picks are romance, and my third has to do with relationships and similar themes. But my first pick is Aisha at Last by Uzma Jalaluddin. Aisha at Last is a modern romantic comedy set in a tight-knit Muslim community in Toronto. So Aisha is a poet who has set aside her art to work as a substitute teacher to help support her family and to help pay off some debts to a rich uncle. When Aisha is asked to help plan a local convention for Muslim youth, she meets Khalid. He's handsome and he's smart, but he's also annoyingly conservative and judgmental. But when there's a surprise engagement announced between Khalid and Aisha's cousin Hafsa, Aisha's torn between her family and her feelings for Khalid. So you'll see this book marketed as a modern spin on Pride and Prejudice. And I would say it does that, but in like very clever ways. It is not as overt as a lot of retellings that I've seen or read. Khalid's definitely a Mr. Darcy. Much like Pride and Prejudice, both Aisha and Khalid unfairly judge each other. As a traditionalist, Khalid is conflicted about Aisha's drive and ambition. And Aisha definitely judges Khalid for his traditional dress and attitudes, but they both can't deny this like magnetic pull that's between them. So I loved this book because it gave me a look into the lives of young modern Muslims in like an urban city setting. It's Canada, but it feels very much like the US. There's a lot of balancing of their own ambition and dreams against the responsibilities they feel to like their family and their community. I like that it explores the different beliefs and ideals held by those in a community as opposed to like presenting them as a monolith because they're anything but. I recommend this for anyone who loves rom-coms, contemporary romance, and reimagined classics. It's very joyful, it's heartwarming, and it's fun. You can find it from OPL as an ebook, downloadable audiobook, and a print book. So, Michelle, what's your second pick?
All right. So I think in a previous episode, we talked about if you're struggling to read, that short stories are a really great way to boost your reading habit again. So if you're in the mood for something really compelling, look no further than If You See Me, Don't Say Hi by Neil Patel, which is also just kind of a great saying for our current times also. I had definitely been drawn to this book by the cover and that title itself. So this is a great debut short story collection from Patel, and it centers around the complex lives of first-generation Indian Americans, which some are queer and some are straight. The strongest stories in this collection stood out due to their deep emotional resonance and the layered relationships between characters, which was often influenced by markers such as class and gender. Patel really uses his authentic voice to dispel the many assumptions people have about Indian Americans and reveals the messier truth about individual experiences with forbidden desires and devastating heartbreak. It's just a really good reminder of how human we all are. So I was completely riveted by each thought-provoking story, and I think others would be too. Dave, what else do you have for us?
I also have a short story collection. I like short stories quite a bit because also for the reason you mentioned, but also because that's kind of where you find the new up-and-comers. Short stories are important kind of in the same way that singles are important for most forms of music, but mine is Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. Horror is a sadly resonant genre for writing about women's experiences and LGBTQ experiences. Machado is one of my favorite new writers, and this book is really creepy and thought-provoking. The stories are about sex and mutilation, and they really show her strengths as a very vivid writer. Some highlights for me include the story Especially Heinous, where she reworks all 12 seasons of Law & Order SVU into kind of a surreal horror narrative. The heartbreaking and creepy opener, The Husband Stitch, which is about a lot what it sounds like, and the bleak post-apocalyptic story Inventory, which is about a woman kind of taking a catalog of her sexual experiences after the apocalypse. I will put a content warning on this one. A lot of these stories deal with violence against women and sexual violence, as well as with eating disorders. So if that's an issue for you or an issue for you right now while things are relatively bad in the world, be sure to use that knowledge. It is available through OPL in print, audiobook, and ebook. Ellie, what do you have next?
I just wanted to say I love that you mentioned short stories as a way to kind of keep an eye on what's happening in the literary world. I didn't realize that N.K. Jemison's latest The City We Became is based off of a short story, and you can find that short story online, and it's amazing. So if you're waiting for that book from the library, you can grab that one. Yes. I'm going to talk about a middle grade novel. So this is a novel that is published for kids, but I picked it up because I thought that it sounded really interesting. It also helped me break a terrible reading rut, and honestly, I think it's an incredible read for adults too. So don't be turned off by the fact that it's written for younger kids. It's called When You Trap a Tiger by Tay Keller, and it follows Lily and her mother and sister when they move in with their grandmother. Her halmoni, or grandmother, is beloved around their small town and is one of Lily's favorite people to be around, but her reservations about the move are confirmed when she begins to see magical tigers straight out of her halmoni's Korean folk tales that nobody else can see. And these are like not friendly tigers by any means. I loved reading this intergenerational novel. Lily is resourceful and smart. Her halmoni is so like sweet and stubborn in that like perfect grandmotherly way. And I found the way that Keller interwove mythology and family storytelling to be super unique and engaging. That's the kind of book that I like to read, and her take on it was very different from anything I've ever read. Like I said, I picked this one up because sometimes kids' chapter books can break a reading rut that I'm in. So if you're looking for something to change up your patterns or something to read out loud to your 8 to 12-year-old, When You Trap a Tiger combines action and adventure with important messages of family identity and history. And I also think that the Own Voices movement is really important in literature for kids because they're really sensitive and smart about representation in media. So I really wanted to shout out a kidlit author because that's really changing up the landscape of publishing for children. Anna, I loved your first pick. Jesmyn Ward is amazing.
Isn't she
I'm
the
excited
best?
to hear about your next one.
Well, I thought about this later, too late, of course, but my second pick is by another Nigerian author. So I should have tied that into Freshwater better, but we'll talk about it now. So my second pick is Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. And it was one of my favorite books over the past couple of years. It came out in 2013 and it won the National Book Critics Circle Fiction Award. So she is a Nigerian writer, as I mentioned, who moved to the US when she was 19 to begin college. And this book is very much about that experience for a fictional character. It's available as an ebook through OPL. So it begins with the main character, Ifemelu's life in Nigeria. So we get a little taste of where she's from, what her life is like, and then she moves to the US shortly after the beginning of the novel. So the setting of the story shifts between Nigeria, the US, and England, and we just follow her from her college experience on. It's kind of an epic book. Ifemelu experiences racism for the first time after she moves to the US, and then she also has to learn how to navigate life as an immigrant. That's not something she's ever been before. There's a really sweet love story at the core of this story as well. And if you like epic, thought-provoking reads about racism and immigration, and also if you maybe have an interest in Nigeria, you should pick this one up. Adichie really makes you fall in love with her characters in a deep way. I was like thinking about them long after I finished the book. I also read that Lupita Nyong'o is producing and starring in an HBO adaptation of this book that was supposed to come out in 2020. It's probably delayed because of the world, but I'm excited that this book will get renewed attention again because of that. So that's my second pick. Erin, what do you have?
That's awesome. I've read like most of her shorter books, like where We Should All Be Feminist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what's the other one that she wrote to like as a letter to her friend's daughter? But yeah, they're like great little books. They're small, they're tiny, but they like have just beautiful writing and messages in them about those different topics. So
Yeah,
she's fantastic. I also like to
Yes.
watch her speak because she's a great speaker and presenter.
Isn't that the author that's featured on Beyonce's visual album?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I've read We Should All Be Feminists, and it is, everybody should read that.
The other one is Dear IGOLE, or A Feminist Manifesto and 15 Suggestions.
Yes.
Just they're like great books to give to people. Like I gave that one to a friend who like had a daughter, and they're just beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my second pick is another romance, like I said. And I'm kind of cheating because I'm going to talk about a whole series. And that's the Wedding Date series by Jasmine Guillory, who I just also love to really talk about. So it has a chronological order, but I started with the second book, and I think you could actually pick up any book in the series and start there. The book I'm going to talk about is A Proposal. And this is the book that got me to be like, oh, I do really like romance, because I hadn't like really ever admitted that to myself or anybody. So I'm very thankful for that. Nick, a freelance writer, is blindsided when her social media obsessed boyfriend of like 5 months proposes to her on the Jumbotron at a Dodgers game. It's like super embarrassing, and he spells her name wrong. So then she says no, like on the Jumbotron, and like disappoints the whole stadium of fans. And this like handsome stranger, Carlos, who just like happens to be a doctor, like rushes in and saves her. So it starts as this like fling between them and really escalates to the point that they have to kind of like be like, what are we in this for? What is this about? Or like confront their actual feelings. It's really fun. It's sunny. This plays into, I think last week we talked about books with settings. It's set in LA and like in a way that I just really like. All the main characters in the series are women of color, and then the cast of characters is like around it is pretty diverse. And then those other characters like will pop up as the main character in another book in the series. So you get to like check in with all your favorites as you go along. The dialogues are really snappy. There's always like a couple like steamy love scenes in each of them. And I love romance for its tropes. So like this series really gets to play with some of like my favorite ones. So there's like a fake relationship. There's like enemies to lovers, stuck in an elevator, a second chance at love. And there's a 5th book that's scheduled to come out in June. And we have that whole series in print, ebook, and audiobook at a minimum. And then we might have them in like large print or a book club bag as well. And that fifth book is already in the catalog if you wanted to get on the hold list like I am. So Michelle, what is your next pick?
So my next pick isn't quite as sunny, but it is set in Nigeria, which also seems a theme of the day. So released this year in 2020, I highly recommend The Girl with the Louding Voice by Abby Dar-A. It is a powerful, emotional debut novel told in an unforgettable voice of a young Nigerian woman who is trapped in a life of servitude, but is determined to fight for her dreams and choose her own future. So the girl's name is Aduni, and she is 14 years old and wants nothing more than to be educated, as that is one of the ways out of some poor circumstances. But unfortunately, she suffers a life of abuse and trapped in this life of servitude. It is so powerful and heart-wrenching, but Aduni does learn to not let her misfortune silence her. She realizes she must stand up for not only herself, but for other girls, for the ones who came before her and were lost, and for the next girls who will inevitably follow. So she finds the resolve to speak however she can, in a whisper, in a song, in broken English, until she is heard, which hence the name of the book, The Girl with the Louding Voice. You can find this title in our catalog as print, large print, ebook, and downloadable audiobook. And David, what's your last one?
My last one is Jade City by Fonda Lee. I finished it in January on a train to Chicago this year, so it's pretty fresh in my head. It's a fast-paced and action-packed fantasy story with a setting that resembles a present-day, like Hong Kong action movie, but with magic. It's a great read for someone looking for both crime family intrigue and detailed fight scenes written by an actual martial artist. The sequel was published in 2019, so they are both available in OPL in print, and the first one is also an ebook. Ellie, what do you have next?
Hi, everybody. I totally forgot to check my formats. So Freshwater is available as an ebook. It's actually checked in right now, so someone please check it out. And then I believe When You Trap a Tiger is just a print book right now. And then my next title is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, which we have as a ton of different formats. We've got large print, regular print, ebook, downloadable audiobook. We've got it all. So I'm not going to talk too much about this book because honestly, describing it too much kind of does it an injustice. It's Vuong's first novel. He's got a background in poetry, so it's just really incredibly gorgeous writing. It's a short book. I want to say that it maybe is under 200 or maybe like 200 and some change pages, but it's extremely poignant. Like, it's one of those books that you read like 3 pages and you have to kind of like sit with for a while. So even though it's short, it's just dense. Vuong is first generation Vietnamese American. So he comes from a family of immigrants. This book is kind of a coming of age novel. That's pretty much all I want to describe about it. And Vuong is, I'm not sure exactly how he identifies, but somewhere in the LGBTQIA village. And a funny description of this book for me is that one of my friends posted like, what's our next great American novel? And like, no question, I was like, On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous is the one of our generation. So, I mean, I can't really recommend it any higher than that.
Cool.
Yeah, so pick that one up. Anna, what is your next book?
Yeah, I want to second your recommendation for On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. It was so good. I read that earlier this year and I like couldn't not put it down. It's super beautiful. So
just so moving. Like,
yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah, someone check out that ebook, please. Or do we have it as an ebook?
We do. We have it ebook, downloadable audiobook, and people are reading it right now.
Yay, good, wonderful. Good job, public. My last pick is a book called Cantoras by Carolina de Robertis. De Robertis was born in Uruguay, and she's a queer author. And this book came out last year. It's also set in Uruguay, and it follows 5 queer women over the span of a few decades. So it's a pretty epic book. And OPL has this in print format currently. So our story begins in 1976, and Uruguay is in the midst of a fascist dictatorship where it is a crime to be gay. So Cantora is the title of the book. It literally translates to female singers in Spanish, but it was used as slang for queer women to identify each other. So that was a label that was used at that time. So 5 women who are different in pretty much every possible way, except for like the common thread of their sexuality, come together through different circumstances, and they end up finding and building like a vacation home together of sorts on the isolated Uruguayan coast. So it becomes a refuge where they can really just be completely and honestly themselves, even though they're at constant risk of being exposed and having really terrible things happen to them as a result. So this is a really character-driven book about resilience and relationships and creating your own family. I really like that it was like historical fiction through the eyes of marginalized populations, and just found it to be a really beautiful, immersive, and heartbreaking, but also affirming story. So highly recommend that one. Erin, what do you have next?
Yeah, so my last pick is All My Mother's Lovers by Alana Masad. So Maggie Krause is 27. She has a very stable job, parents who like epitomize domestic bliss. And finally, she's found someone that she feels like she can settle down with, which is her artist girlfriend, Lucia. So when Maggie's mother dies tragically in a car accident, Maggie returns home to California to help with the funeral and sit Shiva with her dad and brother. So along with her mother's will, there are 5 letters that her mother asked them to mail upon her passing, and they're all to men that they don't know who they are. So instead of mailing them, Maggie decides to embark on a road trip to hand deliver the letters in an effort to kind of like outrun her grief and to try and unravel her relationship with her mother, a relationship that she's felt was always strained since she came out as a teenager, and her mom always felt like uncomfortable with her sexuality. So what she finds on this road trip is like a mother that she maybe only half knew and like a second life. I think, as you can tell from the title, what she finds when she's on this road trip. And it kind of makes her question everything she thought she knew about her family and relationships and identity and like sexuality even. So I'll try not to do this too often, but this book isn't actually out yet. It comes out on May 26th, but you can put it on a hold now in the catalog, or like pre-order it from your favorite bookstore is great too. And as a callback to like, I think our first episode, this is the book that got me out of my pandemic reading slump. It was the first thing that like I picked up and like really wanted to like hunker down and read it. And it just like really, really grabbed me. The author is a doctoral student at UNL in Lincoln, and she was at last year's Omaha Lit Fest. And this is her first novel, but she's getting like some amazing buzz. Big publications are calling her like a book to read this year. So that's really exciting for her. Anybody got any last thoughts?
You brought up the idea of the monolith kind of concept. Mm-hmm. And I just think that's so important for people to think about. Like, if you're not familiar with a different group, it's so easy and almost like reflexive for a lot of us to just view them as like, this is this big monolithic, like everyone's the same, like just viewing people as a group and not as individuals. And that's so important to keep in mind. And I think reading these kinds of books is such a huge and pretty easy way to like open your mind and like really understand that we're all really multifaceted, and you cannot make assumptions about people just because they have, one facet of their identity, you don't know all of the other ones. So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah. People are people, right? We're all individuals. Like,
I read a review of Freshwater that the person was like really unhappy with. They kind of expected, I guess, some kind of like trans narrative for them to hold on to. They expected like something really different from it. And I get that when you read a summary of a book and it's not what you expect, but I think kind of the power of Freshwater and of Own Voices fiction is that it doesn't follow these narratives that we assume about each other, about diverse writers. You know, it's a narrative, it's fiction, and it is powerful because it's diverse and not what you're expecting. I love when I pick up a book and it takes me on a journey that I didn't necessarily expect that time.
I felt that way like by All My Mother's Lovers. The book, if you read the book jacket, it's talking about like sexuality and identity and stuff, but it takes a while to get into it. Maggie's so comfortable in her skin of who she is, but like something that gets kind of reiterated to her during her travels is that like a couple of like older people are like, your generation didn't create the LGBT community, like we've always been here. And she just like, I think it was interesting to see her learn about different people who like not share her same identity, but like are in this community that she is a part of. But it just was something that kind of like took me by surprise. And I thought was really interesting for her to like explore that just these older people being like, you know, like gay people have always been around. And like, it was like, hey kids, you didn't invent this. And I thought it was cute. It was really nice.
Got some sassy queer elders.
Yeah. Are we ready for query of the week?
Yeah.
Okay. So the query of the week this week is, what book have you read more than once? I'll go first. I've reread a couple books and most of them fail me on rereads, which is why I don't read them too often. But the one that has never failed me on a reread is Contact by Carl Sagan. It was one of my favorite books as a kid. It like taught me that like women could be scientists, which was a huge thing for me in like 6th grade. So I've read it like multiple times since then. So one of my favorites. It's hard to pick a favorite book, but if I have to pick a favorite book, that's probably like up there, if not the favorite one.
I'm coming in real basic with mine because it is the Harry Potter series. But I do like to say that I've read it in multiple formats, from the illustrated editions to regular print, and of course on audio, which is beautifully narrated by Jim Dale. There's just so much comfort in it, and I swear every time I read or listen to it, I am picking up on something new. So that's why I love rereading that series.
I went through a phase in high school where I reread Lord of the Rings every year. Nowadays, I can sometimes get a little judgmental about people who only read a specific kind of fantasy, just because I feel like, you know, there's like a lot of things people can say with it. And, you know, why would you limit yourself to just one thing? And then it's good to remind myself that, hey, I used to just reread the same 3 books over and over and not really explore the genre outside that for a good 4 years of my life.
Rereading is important though.
Yeah.
It is.
So I also picked like a formative book from my youth. I picked The House of the Spirits by Isabel Allende, which is actually kind of the book that made me fall in love with Own Voices books. So it all comes together. Shout out to Connie Mills, my junior year English teacher, for assigning this. It's an incredible book. Highly recommend it. And yeah. Anna, what is yours?
Yeah, there are very few books, at least in my adult life, that I've read more than once. But one of them is The Savage Detectives by Roberto Bolaño. He was a Chilean writer. This book is largely set in Mexico City, and it follows the main characters are 2 poets who are like on this epic quest. They want to start their own literary movement, and they're trying to seek out this elusive poet they're traveling the world to try to find her. So this book is really clever. It's kind of a slow burn. It's very, like, if you like books that are about like the counterculture, this would be a good one to pick up. There's a lot of sex and drugs and talk about what is art and what does it mean to make it in a violent and chaotic kind of world. So I really like this book too.
I almost forgot to tell you guys, we have our first like listener response. So here we go. This is from Amy. Mr. Darcy Takes a Wife. Pride and Prejudice continues, which she says, one of my favorite go-tos when I want a period romance novel with a strong male lead, heavy on the actual novel components and not just the steamy love scenes. although it has plenty of those as well. And I feel like it's important to note that she also sent a GIF of Alyssa Milano like fanning herself with a, with a book, meaning it's like very steamy.
Nice.
So love to have that as our first listener query of the week.
Thanks, Amy.
Yeah. So that is our show. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us. We'd love to hear your answer for our next query of the week, which is, what is your dream library to visit? This could be real or fictional. Send your responses in a short tweet-length response to our email, which is thebookdrop@omahalibrary.org. The Book Drop is produced by Omaha Public Library. Our theme music is Trapped in Amber, courtesy of the band Lucid Fugue. Don't forget to subscribe to The Book Drop on your favorite podcast app, and like and follow Omaha Public Library on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll talk to you next time on The Book Drop.